Futures Radio Show, sponsored by CME Group, the world's leading and most diverse futures and options exchange. CME Group's markets help individuals and businesses around the world effectively manage risk. For access to free educational tools and resources for the active individual trader, please visit activetrader.cmegroup.com.
Every day, traders and investors dive in to tackle the ever-changing markets to find opportunity. Futures Radio Show is your number one source for answers to the questions that all market participants want to ask. Veteran futures trader Anthony Crudele sits down with the most influential leaders and top traders in the industry. Now, here's your host, Anthony Crudele.
Best Moments episode of Futures Radio Show, sponsored by CME Group, the world's leading and most diverse futures and options exchange. CME Group's markets help individuals and businesses around the world effectively manage risk. For access to free educational tools and resources for the active individual trader, please visit activetrader.cmegroup.com.
Every day, traders and investors dive in to tackle the ever-changing markets to find opportunity. Futures Radio Show is your number one source for answers to the questions that all market participants want to ask. Veteran futures trader Anthony Crudele sits down with the most influential leaders and top traders in the industry. Now, here's your host, Anthony Crudele.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the newest episode of Futures Radio Show, where we will highlight our favorite moments of the show over the past month. But before we get started, I want to thank all of our sponsors: CME Group, Trading Technologies, RJO Futures, and Top Step Trader. So without further ado, let's dial into those top moments of the show this month. So it sounds to me, with your slow and steady approach, a big part of your execution is low leverage, and then use options as well.
Correct. Yeah. And I mean, I think if you're honest with yourself, you can really have a hard mental stop of where you'd want to be out of the market if it broke. But at the same time, that option gives you the leeway to be more patient with that trade to come to fruition. I mean, there's a lot of times I also like to look at a closing level. A lot of time, the market will go down intraday somewhere, but it's not closing down there. So that's something I think is very important too, is seeing where the market closes. And you may have we use 3 stars for our levels here, and you may have a 3-star support level that's well ahead of where your mental stop would be if it happened intraday. But you're able to let it close below there. And then your options making some money back for you, and then you say this isn't working. I want to get out of it. You can be wrong. Before some of the bigger levels are breached, something can change. I think that's important to recognize and be honest with yourself.
Can you talk to us a little bit more about how you're using the options market? For example, if you're long, are you just buying puts? What puts are you buying? How far out are you going? Are you rolling those options out? Just talk to us a little bit about that process.
Well, you want to give yourself, like I said, you don't have to be right now, but you do want to give yourself a time frame. I mean, is that time frame 45 days? Is it time 60 days? Is that time frame 30 days? Ultimately, you want to define your time frame, because if you have to be right within some point, but it does not have to be right now. And from there, you want to look at an option that gives you enough value in that time frame. And then after that, you want to find something that's going to be somewhere in the ballpark of a 30 delta. That way, you're cutting your loss by a third. And on top of that, you're also as it goes against you, it's going to be picking up too. So I think that's also important. That's generally speaking, because there's going to be different time frames you're using that are going to cost different amounts as well. And when things rally your way, and I'm using the word rally because I mentioned treasuries and gold in my mind right now. But if something were rallying your way and you have 2 or 3 contracts on, what's to say you can't sell a call against one of them? I mean, and bring in some of that money to cover some of that premium, or roll up something into that. So ultimately, I think there's a way to be able to, I want to stay in the market for a while. If you're going to be risking that, $2,500 a contract, or which hopefully would be end up being less because you're coming to terms with the fact that the trade is wrong. But if you're risking that, you want to be able to stay in a trade for a while. You want to be able to give yourself the staying power and catch that move. I mean, look what gold has done this year, and I mean we're out of 1550. I mean it's been a really heck of a move. If you're able to stay with stuff and let the trend and just ride the trend, those $2,500 risk per contract, I mean, they become nothing if you ride gold for $150.
I think we all understand now how you go about your slow and steady approach. You're using options and futures. And one thing I'm curious about, you mentioned earlier about looking at the lower time frames and doing some intraday trading. So once you have this core position on, are you trading intraday around these core positions?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not sitting here, and no one really is, or no one really should too, but you're not sitting here trading 10 different markets at once. You have different things in your radar. But when I get entrenched in a certain trade, which last year, gold and treasuries was really a lot of my focus, for it's really still into this year, is you're just you begin to know that market and its movements like the back of your hand on a daily basis. And even though I don't really want to be trading a short time frame, you end up seeing opportunities that present themselves. And that's where, being patient and being strategic, some of those lower time frames, even if it's not your major focus, you're going to find a $10 swing in gold, or at least you can jump into something and have a little more of a well-defined stop for a shorter term risk on it, because you're now in this, you have this core position in the trade, and you're watching it, and you're hopefully catching a wave, and you're letting the momentum play out.
Let's focus on some of the things that you guys are doing at Drawbridge. I know lending, trading, custody. Talk to us about that.
So what we're doing is we're a secured lender, and we also do coin lend. We have three main silos. We have fiat lending, where someone who has digital assets but doesn't want to relinquish control can come get a loan from us. We have coin lending, where professional traders who want to borrow coin to transact on exchanges for settlement purposes can come. And then we have an investment product that we offer to people who would like to invest in Bitcoin but don't really know how. And we deploy some of those risk management and yield producing strategies that we do in the other two buckets for a client who wants to come in and get a yield on their Bitcoin or whatever asset it happens to be. And so what we're doing is we're effectively taking tried and true methods from financial markets, from derivatives markets, and applying them in this new space where financial sophistication hasn't caught up with technological sophistication. And we're trying to be on the front edge of that, where we can bring in some of these old, they may seem basic to you and I in terms of saying, hey, we're going to buy a put to hedge some of your exposure. We do things like that one, make lenders coming into the space feel comfortable, and two, people who are transacting in the space do it in a little more responsible and risk-centric way. And that's kind of our thought process in this.
Talk to us about how you use futures, Bitcoin futures, in your business.
Absolutely. So we're risk mitigators in terms of our loans and what we do. So we need to match our futures exposure to our actual coin exposure. And just as exciting, with the CME potentially rolling out options here, hopefully in the next 6 months or so, we use a lot of that in how we structure some of our products. And so we find that using the traditional venues that we're comfortable with from 20 plus years in the business, that we want that to become commonplace in this new industry. And it's exciting to see, groups out there doing that right now.
Hey, everybody. I want to take a moment to thank one of our sponsors, FTSE Russell. They are a leading global provider of benchmarks, analytics, and data solutions. The Russell 2000 Index is a key benchmark for small cap U.S. stocks. Be sure to check out the E-mini Russell 2000 Index futures, contract symbol RTY. For more information on FTSE Russell and their products, please visit FTSERussell.com. As a global macro trader, how do you deal with the 24/7 headlines and tweets that come out that may have an impact on your global macro theme? I mean, are you just blocking that stuff out? Are you engaged and watching it every day? How do you go about that?
Well, everybody will tell you 700 reasons why your position is not going to work. And one of those reasons will be the position, the thing that causes the correction or the reversal of your trade. So it's really hard. And so I think of it as all noise. So I understand certain things. There are certain things economic data that I'll use to keep me in the trend. Other than that, I assume everything is noise. My stop losses will help me if I get that wrong. But basically, I use the economic data to understand my trend and disregard all of the noise that people see. However, I do use Twitter a lot. I don't read other people's research at all, really, but I do use Twitter a lot and get the context of what people are thinking. So, for example, recently, everybody has been looking for a correction in the bond market. Now, sometimes you get the point where everybody thinks there's going to be a correction coming and they all get washed out. We got that in August, and then they're all at it again. I mean, every single person. And at that point, often you do get the correction. Now, the first one or two attempts have been washed out. Now we might get a larger correction and it'll give them a bit of comfort. Generally trading markets is all about how much discomfort you're feeling, because when you feel comfortable for too long, it's going to go against you for a while. So, I use social media to just understand how other people are thinking and if I'm missing anything major, but I try and avoid trading on headlines. Yeah, it's a very different when you're trying to trade economic trends, you can't trade headlines.
We talked about your top macro theme and how you're trading it right now. Give us one macro theme besides the one you discussed earlier that traders should be watching for right now.
Anybody should pull up the chart of the CRB index going back 40 or 50 years and look at the size of the top pattern that is forming and ask yourself, what world are we going into? Do you think that this is an inflationary return to normal world that chart is telling you? Or do you think that this is something much bigger? And I think there is a potential that this could be something much bigger, much more deflationary, much larger. Also, stare at the chart of something like the US dollar broad-based index or even the RMB and say to yourself, what are these currency charts telling me? Why does it look like the dollar is going to explode and commodities are going to collapse? What is all that about? So that's what I'll say is I think things that people aren't looking at. People are too busy in the weeds and not seeing the big picture.
You've worked with so many people and helping them with high performance. What is something that you do to help them increase their focus?
Everybody that I work with, the first thing we do is we put them on an AM routine to get their body prepped and primed for their day. Okay, it involves everything from breathing to flexibility to heart rate spiking to visualizing what it is that they want to do that day. Okay, so that's where we start. Everybody starts there. But when we actually get into our environment, I believe that people can't focus more than 90 minutes at a time. So what I do is I break their day into 90-minute blocks. So their first block's 90 minutes, then they got a 10 to 15-minute rest. Boom. During that rest, they can kind of let their mind be free. They could get a bite to eat. They could do something, snack, whatever. We work on what that is for certain people, that depending on, what their physical limitations are. And then they get into their next 90-minute block. And then same thing. And we literally repeat that throughout the day, knowing that it's really hard to sit there for 3 hours and stay focused. So that's one thing. Then on the other end, it's also identifying, hey, what are your key distractions? And this is why I talk a lot about conversation with yourself, as if it's you, but there's actually somebody asking you questions, but that somebody is actually you. But how often do we ask ourselves questions like, hey, so what is it that's distracting you? Like, you need to identify what those distractions are. Is it notifications on your phone? That's easy. Is it social media? That's easy. Is it people coming to your desk and trying to talk to you? That's easy too. What is it that is taking your focus away? Now, all those external things are really easy to control because we can turn them off, we can talk to people, we can handle all that. The biggest problem is when we have an internal focus problem. And that's focus meaning you're worried about something else, and that's pulling your mind. And you're being pulled here and pulled there and pulled there. So we have to say, what is that pull? What is that thought? What are those tripwires, again, that are pulling you away from your focus, right? And I also think, too, we have to understand the magnitude and the importance of the task in which we're doing. Sometimes when we do something for a lot of years and it becomes somewhat routine for us, even if it's complicated and it's still routine, we don't take it as serious as if we're a trader that's just getting started, that's trying to cut his or her teeth in the business, you know? So we have to get ourselves back to that point, but we can only do that when we identify that we're not at that point. What's changed for us? So I do a lot of Q&A, both as a coach and as an individual on myself, and I teach my guys to do that as well.
I love what you said there, Coach. I think Q&A is so important. I ask myself questions all the time. How are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing? Why are you doing this? Hold yourself accountable. Know where you're really at. I love that you said that.
It holds you accountable to you. Now, some people may think you're crazy, but listen, I know a lot of successful people. You'll see batters, in baseball, you'll see pitchers on the mound, in the batter's box or on the mound. They're literally talking to themselves. One of our players, I'm sure everyone knows him, Andy Pettit. We used to say that he used to have somebody sitting on his shoulder that we named him Lloyd, and he would have a conversation with Lloyd the entire game, and they'd be going back and forth, arguing with each other, conversing, and he didn't even know he was doing it, but it was his way of just staying in it. So there's no rules, man. You could be a little off the cuff and off your rocker, and that's okay. It's whatever you have to do to be great, and you got to identify what that is or what those things are.
You're so right, Coach. It's so personal.
It's so personal. Like, man, I have guys that I couldn't even dare introduce them to any level of meditation. They're just not there. Meditation is I call it a far right activity, and you may be far left in that, for you, just not being on your phone is meditative, whatever it is. But there's guys, you have to walk them up the stairs and through the process to get them over to the right. Not that meditation is bad. They just can't get there yet. There's prerequisite steps to getting them there.
It was tough for me to get there. I'll tell you that. It was tough for me to just commit. Even 5 minutes was tough. Now I can't go a day without doing it multiple times a day. It's crazy.
It's something I see you do is exact. This is kind of where I start, guys. On that process of kind of calming their mind with a daily walk, right? Do a daily walk. It may start out when you're walking with your phone, but then we say, okay, how can we walk without our phone? Maybe it's every other day, and eventually they start walking without their phone. And then over time, we walk them through those steps. So again, it's okay. Where you are is definitely moving more towards the advanced side of things. But you see the benefits of it.
Do I ever? And I got to tell you, it's just like with trading. When things were going good, I'd press because I saw the benefits of continuing to trade when I was making money. And just like with meditation, I continue to do it because the benefits just keep getting better and better. I feel better. I think better. We talked about focus. I focus better. So there's just so many reasons why I do it on a day-to-day basis. And just like you had mentioned before, you go through your process, finding things that work for you and just continuing to do those things.
Yeah. And that's all that matters. It's like one thing I've learned in baseball that was really important. Again, you're dealing with high performers. They play for money. Everything matters. But you have to find what works for you. And there's so much stuff out there. And honestly, for some people, meditation may not be the thing for them. And that's just an example. For some people, drinking coffee with butter in it is not for them. You got to figure out what it is for you. And just because, somebody else that's a really high performer does it, that doesn't mean it's a good fit for you. So don't feel like you're missing out. Don't feel like you're doing it wrong. Don't feel like you're a low performer because this person is doing it and you're not. Everyone has their own process and their own way. And that is the goal, to find out what works for you. When you figure that out, man, you're going to feel good.
Well said, Coach. One thing before I let you go, you have worked with one of my all-time favorite athletes, who I actually had the great pleasure of meeting, Derek Jeter. Give us one thing that you worked with him and helping him with his performance.
Yeah, so, this was a little bit later in his career. This was a guy that didn't really deal with much adversity mentally or physically through the first probably 15 years of his career. But towards the end of his career, he started to decline a little bit, physically. And when you start to decline physically in a sport that requires, 100% physicality, your mind can also slip with it. So what we started to do was the same process I'm talking about here. It's just, again, identifying the physical. Hey, Derek, what is your limitation? Where do you feel limited? Hey, I feel limited, going to my left side, going to my glove side, and at times I feel limited going to my non-glove side. Okay, so what we did, we pulled out video, we started to analyze his first step, his second step, his crossover steps, his angles, all of those things, and then we also built a training program to add more horsepower to his body. So what we worked together on was improving his overall efficiency as he was aging and slowing down and trying to make up for an aging body with more efficient lines. We call it lines to the ball. So he was able to get to balls more efficiently. Even though he didn't have the speed, because his angle was so good, it was able to make up for that loss of speed. So it's the same kind of thing that we're talking about in this whole conversation. Figure out what works for you. Identify your weaknesses, and then create the plan and the process to help you overcome and attack that plan. That's it.
Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying the show so far, but I want to pause and thank one of our sponsors, Trading Technologies. I started using TT in the year 2000, and I love it. It is by far the best trading platform I have ever used, and I've tried a lot of them. With TT, you can trade the global markets from virtually anywhere in the world. They are the world's fastest commercially available futures trading platform. I highly suggest you go try out TT, especially because you can try it for free. Just go to tryttnow.com and set up your account. Talk to us about some of the current positions you are in and why you got into those trades.
Of course, I am long precious metals, and in fact, all three precious metals I am long: gold, silver, as well as platinum, because there is so much of fear in the world that the precious metals is being invested into as the only safe haven that is left. The bond markets are too much in fluctuation and in flux, and that is the reason a lot of people are shifting their money, in fact, from the bonds and other commodities into precious metals, as well as people who are involved in the stock markets are also looking at shifting 10% of their risk capital into the precious metals part of it. So in fact, all three precious metals I am long in different proportions and at different pricings. I am also involved in coffee longs because I expect next year Vietnam and Brazil both to register a much lesser crop, and the inventory levels with the warehouses are also depleting at a much faster pace. So that is going to be a long bull run for coffee, which can even last from 3 to 5 years, because usually coffee bushes take a long time to mature again. And in that whole process, the coffee prices can spurt. also, there is huge demand for coffee coming in from the millennials. And the shift from tea drinkers to coffee drinkers is being seen worldwide.
Now, that one you have a really long-term, I would call it, perspective on it. So are you just in outright futures in that one, or would you use any options in this particular scenario?
In this scenario, I have entered into options of longer time horizon, but eventually I will move into the futures. I would prefer to roll it over quarter to quarter. That strategy has always worked out for me.
So when you have an idea like you do in coffee that could take, you're saying it could take years before it comes into play, you then will start off with options, and then, correct me if I'm wrong, if you start to see that the play is working, then you start to get in with futures. Okay.
Very much.
What is a macro theme that you are currently watching that has not yet turned into a trade?
Natural gas. I am looking at natural gas with the glut in the markets, and considering that whatever heat wave that was supposed to happen in Europe and America is done with, I expect natural gas to collapse big time.
What would be a trigger for you to start getting into a short position in natural gas?
I think 4 weeks of injection above 60 BCF would be my trigger point. I've already had 2 weeks of above 70 BCF injection already in. So 2 more weeks and I will take my call whether I need to short natural gas big time or not.
Seasonality is something that everybody can see. So there's nothing proprietary about it. What separates you and gives you your edge over other people that are trading using seasonality?
Well, that's a great question. I think it's really the spread trading part of it. Outrights do move seasonally as well, but the interaction between 2 months is a little bit unique. And now usually, it's based off the front month. If I'm long the front month, that's usually a bullish position. But the commodity can go up and the spread can get narrower. And so it's a little more complex than just watching the outright. There are very definitely things unique to the spreads that you wouldn't see in the outright market. And I would just tell you that there's just not a lot of people in tune with that.
Thank you for listening to Futures Radio Show. If you have any questions or comments for myself or my guests, please visit futuresradioshow.com and sign up to be a premium member for free. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes.